Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade, and this one will be my Mythic Plus guide for Retribution Paladins on patch 10.1. So as a small disclaimer, the main focus of this guide as always is on keys and dungeons, and we'll be talking about raid builds. Since every raid encounter is different, it's better to get the builds for that content from sites like Warcraft logs, where you can use specific builds for specific bosses. With that being said, let's go over the contents of this guide. So we'll be talking first about talents, then we'll talk about crafted gear, then we'll move on to trinkets and special gear, stat weights, enchantments and gems, rotation samples, and I'll also be doing a small part at the end with useful macros and all the weak auras I use. So let's start with the guide. Okay guys, let's talk about talents. So this is the general build I use for most of my Mythic Plus runs, all the talents here will be down in the description down below, but I wanted to talk about different adaptations that you can make to face in different situations or different dungeons, So let's talk about the general side, and then we'll talk about the Retribution side, the specific side, So on the general side, we got all the good Paladin utility that we bring, we got Lay on Hands, we got Blessing of Freedom, we got Blessing of Sacrifice, we got Blessing of Protection, but we can go even further in utility. You can just take a point off Fist of Justice and bam, you got Cleanse Toxins. Cleanse Toxins is really good for dungeons like Bracken High Hollow, Underrot, House of Infusion, places where poison and disease are annoying. But we can also deal with the new affix Afflicted. We don't know when this is coming, but when it comes, be sure to take a Cleanse Toxins point, because you will help the group a lot, because you can just make those ghosts disappear before they do the cast and reduce your group's haste by 50%. Okay, so that's not all. We can also deal with the new affix Entangled. Actually, this week already passed, but normally you just remove a point in Light Force Blessing and you can take Unbound Freedom. That way you can get freedom for yourself, remove the affix from yourself, and remove the affix from other person, especially important targets like tanks. Tanks really don't like to move when they're positioning mobs, so if you can just freedom them when they get an entangling affix, that's a really good help for the group, because the mobs will be packed together and everyone can do more DPS. And that there is more. We can even deal with the other new affix that is called Incorporeal. This will cost you 2 points in Fist of Justice, but I think it's worth the value. We can use Turn Evil. So the new affix Incorporeal will spawn like 2 mobs similar to Explosive. These mobs last for 20 seconds and they cast every 8 seconds, and they do casts that last 8 seconds. You gotta interrupt those casts with hard CC, and we have Turn Evil. We can just fear one of them for 40 seconds and the mob will just disappear. You can't break the fear because the mobs are immune to damage, so you're pretty safe to just keep AoE while you just fear one of them, Pretty simple, great utility of Retribution Paladins. And if that doesn't work, you can always like stun it and stuff, if something happens. But Turn Evil is going to be great utility when Incorporeal affix happens. You don't really want that Incorporeal mob to cast, because that's 50% damage reduction on the whole group, and that's really going to slow down your runs. As you can see, we bring a lot of utility as Retribution Paladins, and we have a lot of things that we can just make adaptations to improve the dungeons that we do. Okay guys, on the Retribution Paladin side, well, there's not much changes that can be done. This is basically a very similar build that many of the other like high reds are using. There are some changes that I made. For example, I like to use Blade of Justice, like improved Blade of Justice, to have 2 charges of it. I think it has value in certain places like Freehold, Underrot, and Bracken Hollow, where there's a lot of mobs, and improved Blade of Justice in combination with Blade of Vengeance makes it work similarly to an extra Divine Storm, in that it will hit everything beyond 5 targets, although at reduced damage, but it will hit it, so it's semi-uncapped AoE damage, which is pretty good. Holy Blade also has its place. I've actually used Holy Blade in places like, for example, Vortex Pinnacle, Neltarian's Lair, places where there's less mob density, and I just want to get the extra holy power from Blade of Justice and use other more powerful like builders, like Hammer of Wrath and Judgments that are stronger in like low count scenarios, because those are capped at 5. So that's one adaptation that I made. Another one is I like to use Divine Wrath. The extra 3 seconds on wings I think has a lot of value, because you can actually squeeze like 1 extra Hammer of Wrath in those 23 seconds of wings. Also it's also nice to have like long wings cooldown. It feels good. And well, that's pretty much it for the build, guys. Yeah, this is probably what you're going to be using. There's actually more changes like you saw in the general Paladin tree, where you can use a lot of utility that you can adapt to almost any affix or any situation as Paladins. Now let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, the next part is crafted gear. So there's 3 main pieces that you want to craft as fast as possible as Retribution Paladins, and 1 piece that maybe you want to craft in the future. So first of all, you want to get a weapon. So if you didn't get a weapon on your first box or second box this week, I highly recommend you to craft a weapon, a 447 weapon with your Shadow Flame sparks. I know it's going to cost you 2 of them, but it's the biggest upgrade you will ever get from any other slot, you know. Also, crafting the 447 weapon is pretty easy because the aspect Shadow Flame crests that you need to craft it come from keys from 16 and onwards, you know, and 16s at the moment are pretty simple to do. So I really recommend you to craft a weapon. If you do have a weapon, then you can craft the other 2 pieces that are really good, which is Allied Risk Guards of Companionship. Is a really just simple stat stick of versatility, just really nice, like about 1 to 1.5% extra damage. Or you can craft Frostfire Legwards of Preparation. I would say because you would have 2 sparks and each one of these pieces cost 1. So Frostfire Legwards of Preparation, really good if you can craft it at 447. It's going to give you about 10% extra haste on every pack that has 5 targets in it, because it stacks up to 5 times. Really, really powerful crafted piece of gear, you know. Other honorable mentions, for example, I'm using this blue silken linen on my weapon that gives me 364 mastery while I'm over 90% of health. In most keys I'm pretty healthy, and this has like about 70 to 80% uptime, which is pretty nice, you know. The blue silken thing is a pretty decent embellishment. This is because mostly item level actually beat my Frostfire's Legwards of Preparations. You can see they are 421 and I have a 441 pair of legs. So when I got this, the simulation told me that my Frostfire Legwards of Preparation were out and I had to swap for another embellishment. That's why I put the blue silken linen here as an honorable mention. Okay, now let's go to the next part. Okay guys, so for trinkets and special gear, let's start with the trinkets. Sadly for us Mythic Plus players, a lot of the good trinkets come from raids, but there's still some stuff that we can get just from Mythic Plus dungeons. Let's start with the raid trinkets. So the best raid trinket that we can get is the Beacon to the Beyond. This trinket is just really strong. It has mastery as its stat. When you use it, you have to cast it for 1.5 seconds or something like that, and you do just massive damage on the target you throw this on. It will do split damage on nearby enemies, so it has some kind of AOE potential. You can see down there that damage is increased for every enemy struck up to 5 enemies. It has a 2.5 minute cooldown. This is just a throw trinket on cooldown or when you have an important thing that you have to kill. It's very simple to use, pretty powerful. Reminds me of Grief Torch from the last patch. Next up in our biz list is Neltarian's Call to Chaos. This thing is really powerful. It's just a stat stick with a proc. It has a critical strike as its stat, and when the effect is, your area of effect spells and abilities have a chance to grant you a bunch of strength and increase damage you receive by 5%. So it has that small downside of taking extra damage. That's not a really big deal for us Retribution Paladins. We are tanky as hell. We don't really care about that 5%. The strength this thing gives is stupid good, you know. It's just a really strong trinket. Sadly, these both trinkets that I mentioned come from the last 2 bosses of the raid, so they're less accessible than other things, you know. And also the Neltarian's Call to Chaos is a very rare item, so you might as well never see it like drop. Most of the time a lot of people are gonna get their Neltarian's Call to Chaos from the weekly box, you know, or something like that. So well, those 2 trinkets are our biz and they are very rare to get, but there are other options that are more accessible. Okay, like I said, there are accessible trinkets from the first like 5 bosses of the raid. The first one that we have to mention, and the best one of those accessible options, is the Ominous Chromatic Essence. This trinket is just a stat stick, you know. It's a neat stat stick with some flavor. Well, you have to go to a part of the Dragon Isles and be loyal to a Dragonflight. So you choose a Dragonflight, and depending on which one you chose, it gives you mastery, versatility, critical strike, or haste, you know. And for every other person in your raid or group that picked a different Dragonflight than you get extra stats. So really nice, just good trinket. The more people that have it, the better this trinket is going to do. Another good trinket from the raid is the Elemental Pocket Anvil. While this trinket might not be really strong in AOE situations, I think this trinket will have some value in tyrannical settings. So the trinket is just main stack strength, and then the equip effect just has a chance to on hit do Shadow Flame damage. When you use it, you increase the Shadow Flame damage and you do a small amount of AoE Shadow Flame around you. And this can stack 3 times, each stack will give it 33% more damage. So like I said, in tyrannical settings, bosses last a long time, you know, so you can stack this thing and it will help you kill bosses. So that's a really good trinket for tyrannical weeks, I think. Next up, we have the Zakili House Grapnel. So this trinket, I actually said it was going to be a gimmick in my predictions of trinkets video, but actually it's pretty good. It has main stat strength. When you use it, you hurl a grapnel to up to 20 yards to a target. It deals physical damage and you go forward to them, and when you crash on them, you do volcanic damage on nearby enemies split. It has a 1.5 minute cooldown, so it also deals increased damage for every enemy struck, up to 5 enemies. It's a pretty decent trinket, you know. It also has that small mobility to boot, so pretty decent trinket. Since we scale with versatility as Red Paladins, I think almost every trinket that does damage is pretty good for us, and this one is no different. Okay, now we can talk about Mythic Plus trinkets. While they aren't biz or super strong, they are pretty decent to use. Also, you can farm them, which is not possible for raid trinkets since you'll only have one shot on those every week. So let's talk about them. So the best unused trinket from Mythic Plus is the Iridius Fragment. So this thing has a 3-minute cooldown, so it's kind of awkward to use sometimes in Mythic Plus. You can't just slap it on your wings and let it rip, because you gotta think when you use a 3-minute trinket. You know, it gives you a huge amount of strength. It comes with mastery, and yeah, that's pretty much the extent of this trinket. It's pretty decent, and you just think when you use it because it's a huge boost of damage. Okay, now we're going to the use, because there's no other thing to use trinkets, you know. One of them is one of the trinkets that I farmed a lot, and it's the Vial of Animated Blood. This thing was so good in BFA. Sadly, this expansion, it's not that good. Similar idea to the Iridius Fragment. It has mastery as its stat, and then when you use it, you gain a bunch of strength. It's on a 1.5 minute cooldown, which is awkward with our cooldowns because we're a 1 minute cooldown class, so we're never going to get the full value of this thing because we're going to treat it as a 2-minute trinket. The strength it gives is pretty high, you know. It decreases every 6 seconds and goes down by a third. It's a good trinket. It will do the job if you don't get lucky with anything from the raid, or you can't get the Iridius Fragment, you know. Personally, I'm using it and it's just doing great in my keys. Okay, next up we have a trinket from Neldaris. So this Mutated Magmammoth Skill. Really simple trinket. It just has main stat strength and it has a proc that does damage. The proc can also do damage in AoE. As you can see there, damage is increased for every enemy struck, up to 5 enemies. Pretty simple trinket, just does damage. I'm actually looking for this trinket at the moment. I'm currently farming it because I didn't get any luck in raids to get any of the trinkets there, and I'm still using a 415 trinket, so this is the best thing I will be able to get for now. Okay guys, as you see, raid trinkets are the best things that you can get. Mythic Plus trinkets, not that good, but will get the job done. Now let's talk about special gear in raids. There is actually 2 pieces of gear that are quite special that you can get from the raids, and they come from the last 2 bosses. The first one is this one, the Voice of the Silent Star. This cape is pretty damn strong, although it comes with a harsh penalty. Doesn't have stamina, so that might hit a bit for us Red Paladins because we get extra stamina from one of our talents, you know, so you might become a bit more vulnerable with this cape. The effect is pretty nice though. Whenever nearby allies take damage, the voice has a chance to beckon you. Upon hearing its call 10 times, you fully submit to its influence, stealing 110 of the 4 nearest allies' lowest secondary stat and giving you the stolen stat plus a set amount of your highest secondary stat for 8 seconds, which is pretty nice. You know, you steal some stats from your friends and you get it for you and you do more damage, you know. Comes with a price because it doesn't have stamina, but I think it's going to be a pretty decent increase in damage. Just be careful with that stamina loss, you know, some mechanics might kill you in high enough keys and Mythic Plus. Now let's go to the next one. Okay guys, this is the big one. So this is Ashkandur, Fall of the Brotherhood. This weapon at Mythic item level is hands down the best weapon in the whole game. It's a 440-50 two-hander with an upside. The upside is just a single target proc that is really nice. Okay, so this weapon is hard to get because it drops from one of the last 2 bosses of the raid. Most of us are never going to see this on a mythic item level, but we might see it at heroic item level. So how does the heroic Ashkandur fare in Mythic Plus content? For tyrannical keys, Ashkandur is really powerful. I recommend using this on tyrannical weeks because the single target proc is going to kill bosses faster. But for fortified settings, a 447 normal weapon is going to do a better job than Ashkandur will be, because the proc, like I said, is only single target focus, so the 447 weapon will do more damage in those situations. Anyways, it's a really cool weapon. Look at it, it's a giant sword, and well, now let's go to the next part. Okay guys, let's talk about stat weights. So stat weights are, as a general rule of thumb, going to look like this. So strength is always going to be first. That means that any upgrade, most of the time, if it's a higher item level from whatever you had, is going to be better, you know. Then it's followed by versatility, then it's crit, is similar to mastery, and then at the end is haste. Remember, this is just a rule of thumb. Don't follow this blindly. Always do the simulations for yourself with whatever gear you have available. Okay, now let's talk about enchantments, gems, and consumables. So, for stat enchantments and gems, normally the simulation will tell you what is best. This season there isn't really a specific gem that we have to get. In past seasons we had the Lariat. We scaled really well with Mastery back then, and we always wanted to get like Earth gems. So our Lariat would always give us the Earth proc, which was Mastery. This season there is nothing like that. So for gems and let's say a stat enchant for rings, it's better to just listen to whatever the simulation tells you and just get those specific gems. There is no this gem that we can get at the moment, or a specific like type of gem that you have to get. For other enchantments, so most of other enchantments give you either a defensive benefit or a small boost on your main stat and stamina. So let's start with the enchantment that goes on the cloak. This is Graceful Avoidance. This is just going to give you a nice amount of avoidance to increase your damage reduction in keys. Always get that. Next one is for your chest. This was Waking Stats, gives you strength. It's just a basic strength gain enchantment. Then you get your Devotion of Avoidance for your wrists, gives you 200 extra avoidance. This is going to give you a total of 5% damage reduction for AOE effects, which is really nice to have in Mythic Plus content. Other enchantments are, there is a new enchantment for belt that blacksmiths can make at the moment. It's called Shallow Clasp something. I don't really have it here, but it's called, let me see. Okay, where is it? Okay, this Shallowed Belt Clasp. This thing just gives you stamina. It goes on the belt. A blacksmith can make it. At the moment, it costs like 80k gold, so I wouldn't recommend just getting it, you know. So just wait for the prices to go down and then get the extra stamina from this enchantment. Next one is the armor kits for legs. Fierce armor kit is really good. It gives you a bunch of strength and stamina. There is a new enchantment as well. It's called the Lambent armor kit. I think it's a bit higher in damage gain than the fierce armor kit, but you lose on the stamina, so that's the drawback. Anyways, it's still, I think, a bit expensive to get the Lambent one, so the Fierce Armor Kit should just do the job. Next up, we have Watcher's Loam. It's just stamina for your feet. It's really good, it's really nice. And for your weapon, you always want to get your Sophic Devotion. It's the best enchantment you can get for Mythic Plus content. I think it's for all content at the moment. Sophic Devotion is just the best enchantment. Okay, so now let's talk about consumables. Consumables are pretty simple in Mythic Plus. There's 2 things that you want to get. Either you get Howling Rune or Buzzing Rune. Both of them have similar values depending on what you really want, you know. After that, the best flask for us is the Phial of Tepid Versatility. It just gives you a bunch of bursts. It's like 4% extra damage just by using this thing. And for food, we want to get either the Faded Fortune cookies as personal food, or just drop a feast. The feasts are extremely cheap at this moment, so just get a stack of feasts and drop it every time you do a key. For our potion of choice, obviously we want to use Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power. If you don't use Elemental Potions of Ultimate Power, you can also use Potions of Choking Disclosure. They're both pretty good potions, but I really recommend getting the Ultimate Power ones, like the rank 3s. They're really, really strong. Okay, I'll leave a shopping list of all the things you need as consumables and enchantments for Retribution Paladins here on your screen, so you can go get them. Now let's go to the next part. Okay, let's start up with the AOE rotation here. Just build 5 Holy Power, then after that use Final Reckoning with Wings at the same time and start spending with Divine Storms, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Wrath, spend again. Then after that we use Divine Toll and spend again, and then just keep going from there using your builders. Like, try to always use your Hammer of Wrath as often as possible. Try to not over cap on Holy Power, but sometimes it's just going to happen. Don't worry too much about it. Same with Judgments. Sometimes you're just going to overlap. Everything we do at the moment kind of throws a Judgment debuff, so it's not a big deal. Okay, so for the single target sample, we built 5 Holy Power, then we use Wings with Final Reckoning, we spend, then we use Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Wrath, we spend again, then we build a bit more Holy Power and use Divine Toll and spend again. So after that, you continue the rotation as cleanly as possible. The only thing you have to take in mind here is try to always use your Hammer of Wrath and put that thing on cooldown, especially in single target situations, because that thing does a lot of damage and we want to use it as often as possible. After that, the rotation, as you can see, is pretty self-explanatory. You just build Holy Power and then you spend. Okay guys, I'm gonna do this part as a little extra, I wanted to show you guys the macros I use whenever I'm doing Mythic Plus Dungeon. So, a lot of them are pretty simple. For example, this one makes me use my Wings, my Final Reckoning, my Pot, and my Trinket, all the things at the same time. It's pretty useful, As you can see here, I'm using also the code of the potion that I want to use, This is for Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power rank 2. But if you go to Wowhead and you want to use, let's say, the Elemental Potion of rank 3s, you put that in Wowhead, and then it's going to show you on the part where the web page is shown a code similar to this one. So you just change the code of that potion for this one, or this potion for that one, and you should just use the rank 3s. It also works for fleeting potions of ultimate power. You can also find that code in Wowhead and just change it here. Or if you don't want to use your pot with your cooldowns like all the time, just erase this line and just use your pot manually. There's also some useful mouse over macros that I use. For example, this one is for cleanse. This one, whenever you're mouse overing someone, it's going to cleanse them, but if you're not mouse overing anyone, it's going to cleanse yourself. So it's pretty useful to help yourself or to help others. Same goes for this mouse over for Word of Glory, mouse over for Flash of Light, mouse over for Sacrifice. I also have mouse over for Blessing of Protection and a mouse over for Lay on Hands. These are just very neat to have because these are the manual mouse overs. There is an option to make everything in the game mouse over. It's here in interface, gameplay, combat, and you go to mouse over cast. If you enable this, every single ability, including offensive abilities, will be mouse over. The problem with this is you really don't want your offensive abilities to be mouse over, because sometimes you can mouse over something by mistake that you didn't want to hit or something like that, So it's better to just use the manual mouse overs. All of these will be down in the description in a Google Doc, so don't worry if you didn't catch them all or copy them down. I'm going to just add a Google Docs so you can just copy at your leisure. Okay, I'll be doing the same thing with my weak auras. Since you guys really like all my weak auras, I'll just leave those as well in Google Docs on the bottom of the description of the video. So just to show you guys what my weak auras are all about, they're basically looking like this. So on the left side, you can see I have the Divine Toll, Wings, and Execution Sentence. You know, whenever you are in Mythic Plus content, if you're using Final Reckoning, this Execution Sentence will turn into Final Reckoning, so you can keep track of your cooldowns. Okay, on the right side, you see this big interrogation signal. Well, that thing is normally my tracker for Divine Arbiter, you know, so you get your stacks and you know when the thing is going to pop up, it just glows up. But normally you don't use Divine Arbiter in Mythic Plus content, but if you ever do, there's a tracker there. After that, next to it is the duration of my wings. I just like to know how long I have on my wings left. Under that, we have Divine Resonance counter, so you can see every 5 seconds whenever you get a Divine Resonance judgment, so you can like adapt to that. Next to it, we have Wake of Ashes. Wake of Ashes is just whenever it's up, I use it, you know, so it does. This reminds me that. And under that is just a Sophic Devotion weak aura that reminds me when I have the small proc, so I can like try to fit as many cooldowns in that small proc, you know. And well, that's all, you know. Ignore this one here. This one is for prot whenever I'm tanking. Sometimes I want to know how much duration of my shield ratios I have. So that one won't be there. But all the other ones will. It's a very simple, minimalistic, like weak aura package that I use. I made them all myself, so it's nothing like out of this world. But you guys seem to like it, so I'll leave it down in the description below. And well guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope my guide helps you reach your Mythic Plus goals, and if it did, subscribe and leave a like to the video. Thanks for watching everyone.